The night that was meant to seal a lifetime of love ended in a burst of violence so sudden, so vicious, that responding officers needed several moments to understand what they were seeing. Inside the honeymoon suite, still decorated with rose petals and half-finished champagne, stood a groom gripping a handgun, his fingers locked stiffly around the trigger. Thin trails of smoke curled from the barrel. His bride lay on the floor in her once pristine wedding gown, the fabric soaked and torn, her veil crumpled beside her motionless hand. 7 shots. 7 blasts that echoed through the hotel corridors. 7 bullets fired by the man who had vowed to protect her only hours earlier. When police shouted for him to drop the weapon, he didn't resist. He didn't cry. He didn't even blink. He simply whispered the same sentence over and over again, words that would send chills through investigators and ignite a case unlike any they had handled before. I saw her real face. Those 4 words became the center of a mystery that spiraled into obsession, deception, and psychological collapse. Because nothing about this crime made sense. Not the timing, not the motive, and certainly not the cold calm with which he explained himself. Detectives soon learned that the truth behind those 7 shots went far deeper than makeup, or the lack of it. This wasn't a crime born in a single moment. It was a disaster waiting to erupt, a marriage built on fear, illusion, and dangerous expectations. And what the groom saw on that wedding night wasn't just the bride without makeup. It was a secret both families fought desperately to keep buried. If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight. Long before the wedding night turned into a crime scene, the couple had been presented to the world as a picture-perfect match. Flawless, elegant, enviable. To friends, to family, and to anyone watching from the outside, they seemed destined for a lifetime of beauty, success, and admiration. The groom was known for his rigid discipline and his obsession with outward perfection. To him, appearance wasn't just vanity, it was identity. He grew up believing that beauty defined worth, and anything less than flawless was a personal failure. It shaped the way he spoke, the way he socialized, and the way he chose the people allowed into his life. The bride was admired for her stunning looks, a woman who seemed effortlessly perfect in every photograph and every public appearance. But behind that appearance was a secret she carried with near-crippling fear. Since her teenage years, she had battled a severe skin condition, one that left her deeply insecure. Makeup was not just a tool for enhancing beauty. It became a mask she never dared remove, even among those closest to her. Friends later confessed that she carefully avoided situations where she might be seen bare-faced. She woke up early to apply makeup before anyone else stirred. She canceled gatherings on days her skin flared. And she built her entire identity around an image she was terrified to reveal. The groom never questioned it. He never saw her without the carefully crafted layer of foundation, contour, and concealer. And in his mind, her beauty wasn't just attractive. It was proof he had chosen the perfect woman. But beneath those layers were 2 people living in fear. One terrified of being truly seen, and the other terrified of anything that challenged the flawless fantasy he demanded. Their relationship did not begin with love. It began with admiration, insecurity, and silent pressure. Pressure that grew with every date, every photo, every compliment from the outside world. And with families who fed that illusion, the weight on the couple became unbearable. Because the perfection everyone saw wasn't real, and maintaining it came at a cost neither of them could survive. Long before the wedding invitations were printed, long before the ring slipped onto her finger, both families had already set the stage for disaster. What looked like a union of love was, in reality, a union built on expectation, image, and fear. The groom came from a family where reputation was everything. Appear perfect, marry perfect, present perfect. That was the rule, spoken or unspoken, in every conversation he grew up hearing. His parents judged people harshly, especially women, by their appearance alone. In their eyes, beauty wasn't a blessing, it was a requirement. And when he introduced his bride-to-be, his parents didn't ask about her kindness, her dreams, or her personality. They only said one thing: she is beautiful. She fits. From that moment, the pressure intensified. The groom believed he had found someone who upheld his family's rigid standard, and the bride felt the crushing responsibility of maintaining an image she could never allow to slip. On her side, the pressure was even darker. Her family knew about her skin condition, knew the emotional scars it had carved into her life. Instead of helping her accept it, they taught her to hide it. They warned her that men valued appearance above all else, and that revealing her natural face would destroy her chances at a good marriage. She learned early that honesty was dangerous, acceptance was unpredictable, and makeup was safer than vulnerability. So before the engagement, her mother had a quiet warning for her. Whatever you do, never let him see you without your face on. It became a family rule, a generational curse disguised as advice. And when the couple rushed into wedding plans, both families stood behind them, praising the image they presented while ignoring the truth underneath. A relationship suffocating under the weight of expectation, a bride living in fear of being unmasked, a groom living in fear of imperfection, and two families too invested in appearances to see the emotional cracks growing between them. By the time the wedding approached, the illusion was complete. The bride believed she had to hide forever. The groom believed he had secured perfection. Neither realized they were walking straight into a nightmare, because the problem wasn't makeup, it was everything they were taught to fear. If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight. The wedding day arrived with all the glamour and spectacle their families dreamed of. Guests filled the hall, dazzled by the decorations, the music, and the flawless appearance of the couple. Cameras flashed, capturing smiles that seemed effortless. Yet none of the guests realized they were witnessing a slow collapse hidden behind perfectly staged moments. From the moment the bride stepped out of the bridal suite, something about her felt strained. Her gown was stunning, her bouquet immaculate, her makeup perfectly applied, but her smile never reached her eyes. Those closest to her said she looked tense, as though holding her breath. Because she was. She had woken up at dawn, hours before her bridesmaids, to redo the layers of foundation, concealer, powder, and contouring she relied on. With every stroke of the brush, her fear grew. She knew today would be the longest she had ever worn makeup without retouching. She worried about cracks, smudges, exposure. Meanwhile, the groom arrived at the venue with an intensity that unsettled even his best man. He glanced at mirrors countless times, adjusted his tie countless times, and scrutinized every detail around him. But it wasn't nerves. It was something deeper, an obsession with how everything appeared. When he saw his bride walking down the aisle, his expression shifted, not into emotional joy, but into something sharper, possessive, analytical, as though he was memorizing every inch of her face, making sure the illusion of perfection was intact. Throughout the ceremony, guests noticed small moments that now seem eerily significant. The groom repeatedly whispered to her to keep her face still. He dabbed at her cheek with a cloth, terrified her makeup might smudge. He frowned every time she laughed too wide or wiped a tear. What should have been a celebration of love turned into a quiet battle against imperfection. The bride's hands trembled as she signed the marriage certificate. The groom's jaw tightened during their first kiss, as though terrified her makeup would transfer. Even during photos, the photographer recalled seeing the groom hovering, watching closely, adjusting her posture, fixing her hair, inspecting her face. The smiles in the pictures hid everything. Her fear of being seen, his terror of anything less than flawless. The wedding guests praised the couple endlessly, calling them perfect together. But behind the veil of compliments, both bride and groom were losing their grip. Because perfection can't be sustained. Not for hours, not for a lifetime, and certainly not under the pressure they carried. As night approached and the celebrations ended, both bride and groom were heading into the one moment she feared most, and the moment he was most unprepared for. When the last guest left and the final congratulations faded into silence, the newlyweds retreated to the honeymoon suite. Behind the closed door, away from the cameras and the carefully staged perfection, the pressure that had been building all day finally began to suffocate the bride. The suite was beautifully arranged, champagne on ice, petals scattered across the bed, a soft glow from dimmed lights. But none of it mattered. For the bride, the only thing she could think about was the weight of the makeup on her skin. It felt heavy, hot, suffocating. Hours of sweat, laughter, tears, and photos had taken their toll. She excused herself quietly, slipping into the bathroom with a trembling breath. She stared into the mirror, seeing the masks she had built over the years beginning to crack along the edges. Her skin burned. Her eyes stung. She knew she couldn't keep it on any longer. Not tonight, not after more than 20 hours of fear. But she also knew what removing it meant. Outside the bathroom door, the groom waited with a rigid, unsettling silence. He had watched her all day, every smile, every step, every tiny moment where her makeup might have shifted. And now, in the privacy of the room, he expected to see the woman he believed he had married. Flawless, perfect, untouched by imperfection. Minutes passed. Then longer. The silence grew tense. When she finally stepped out of the bathroom, she had removed only a portion of her makeup. Her foundation washed away, revealing the natural texture and scarring she had hidden for years. Her eyes stayed down. Her breath hitched. Her hands shook as she waited for him to speak. The groom stared at her as though he had been struck. His expression twisted, not with confusion, but with disgust. He stepped closer, inspecting her face as though examining a damaged object. To him, this was not the woman he presented to his family, not the beauty he felt entitled to, not the perfect partner he had been promised. The bride tried to explain her skin condition, her fears, her lifelong insecurity, but her voice barely formed the words. She had lived every day terrified of this exact moment, and now it was happening, exactly as she feared. Her reaction grew darker. Her breathing changed. Her voice rose from disbelief to anger, then to something unrecognizable. What she experienced next wasn't disappointment. It was rage. A rage fueled by insecurity, entitlement, and a lifetime of obsession with appearances. A rage she had never seen in him before. a rage that would bring the night to its horrific end. Because in the next few minutes, that rage would transform the honeymoon suite from a place of celebration into a crime scene, and 7 shots would follow. What happened next unfolded in less than a minute, yet left an impact so devastating that investigators later described it as rage compressed into gunfire. When the groom's anger peaked, the bride instinctively stepped back, one small, frightened step that seemed to ignite something even deeper inside him. Her exposed face, the very thing she feared showing, became the trigger for a lifetime of his unresolved insecurities. He accused her of deception, of trickery, of trapping him with beauty that wasn't real. His words came rapid, frantic, and sharp, yet the bride's voice barely rose above a whisper. She tried to calm him, tried to explain, tried to tell him the truth he never cared to ask for. Her skin condition, her fear, her years of hiding because of shame she didn't deserve, her hope that marriage would finally give her the courage to be seen. But the groom didn't hear any of it. Investigators would later learn he had packed a handgun in his luggage, an item he claimed was for protection, but kept loaded. In the moment of confrontation, he went for it with no hesitation, as though the decision had already been made somewhere in the darkest corner of his mind. The bride froze. Her eyes widened. Her hands lifted in a desperate defensive gesture. For a split second, she believed he might put the weapon down. Instead, he pulled the trigger. The first shot shattered the room's silence. The second sent her collapsing to the floor. The next 5 followed with mechanical precision. Each one fired without mercy, without pause, and without a single tear from the man holding the gun. 7 shots. 7 bullets that turned a wedding night into a homicide investigation. Neighbors on the same floor later reported hearing a scream that was cut off mid-breath, followed by the unmistakable rhythm of gunfire. Hotel security rushed toward the door, but by the time they reached the door, the violence had already ended. The groom stood over her, the gun still warm in his hand, staring at what he had done, not with shock, but with a cold, eerie detachment. When officers burst inside minutes later, he didn't run, he didn't hide, he didn't ask for a lawyer. He simply whispered the same sentence that haunted every investigator who heard it. "She tricked me. This isn't the woman I married." But as detectives would soon discover, he was wrong. Terribly wrong. Because the truth behind those 7 shots had nothing to do with makeup, and everything to do with the darkness he carried long before he ever met her. When detectives arrived at the scene, they encountered a paradox. A man who had committed an act of extraordinary brutality, yet behaved as though nothing catastrophic had happened. The groom stood calmly, gun lowered, hands visible, almost cooperative. There was no panic, no remorse, no attempt to flee. Officers later said he looked like someone waiting to be told what to do next, not a man who had just executed his bride. The investigators' first task was to secure the room. The second was to understand why. Inside the suite, nothing suggested a struggle. No overturned furniture, no defensive wounds. No sign the bride had attacked or threatened him. Only the haunting stillness of a woman whose life ended in fear and confusion. The forensic team documented everything. The pattern of bullet casings across the carpet, the trajectory of the shots, the groom's untouched clothes, and the bride's makeup wipes still lying near the bathroom sink. But the most disturbing detail from the scene wasn't physical. It was the groom's statement. His voice stayed eerily steady as he repeated the same explanation, that his bride had deceived him, that she had hid her real face, that he felt tricked. Detectives exchanged uneasy glances. It was irrational, unprovoked, delusional. A grown man, fully aware of what he was doing, claiming that a woman removing her makeup justified lethal force. No investigator was willing to accept such a flimsy motive, not for an execution-style killing. One detective asked him directly, "Did she threaten you? Did she hurt you? Did she do anything to put your life at risk?" The groom answered flatly, "Her face was enough." It was then that the lead detective realized they weren't dealing with a simple case of rage. They were dealing with a man whose relationship with beauty and with reality was dangerously distorted. As interviews with family and friends began, the truth grew clearer. Behind his obsession with perfection was a lifetime of pressure, emotional instability, and unaddressed mental cracks. But even that wasn't the whole story. There was something else, a deeper reason he reacted the way he did, a secret the bride's family had never wanted exposed. And when detectives uncovered that secret, they realized the wedding night tragedy didn't begin with makeup removal. It began years before the bride and groom ever met. The trial began just weeks after the shocking wedding night, and the courtroom was packed with the public eager to witness justice, or perhaps to witness disbelief. Few could reconcile the man who sat silently at the defendant's table with the image of the groom who had fired 7 bullets at his bride. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture. They described a man obsessed with perfection, a man who equated a woman's worth with flawless appearance, and a man whose worldview left no room for imperfection, physical, emotional, or otherwise. His friends and family testified about his rigid rules, his controlling tendencies, and the countless times he had demanded compliance in trivial matters long before this tragic night. Psychologists called to the stand explained his condition: extreme narcissistic delusion, obsession with appearances, and a deeply ingrained fear of inadequacy. They described a man who had never learned empathy, a man whose fragile ego demanded control, and whose perception of beauty was dangerously distorted. Meanwhile, the bride's family recounted years of hidden struggles. They described her efforts to conceal her skin condition, her constant fear of judgment, and the pressure she felt to live behind a flawless facade. They explained how she had endured a lifetime of anxiety, not to attract attention, but simply to survive the expectations imposed by both her family and his. As witnesses testified, a pattern became undeniable. The wedding night was only the culmination of decades of psychological pressure, obsession, and secrecy. The bride's natural face was never the crime. It was the trigger. The groom's lifelong inability to accept imperfection was the true danger. The courtroom grew tense as the lead prosecutor delivered the final argument. This was not a spontaneous act of passion. It was the predictable eruption of a mind trained to punish flaw, a man raised to see deviation from perfection as betrayal. In his defense, the groom claimed she had deceived him. He insisted he could not recognize the woman he had married. But the jury saw through the delusion. They saw a man who had chosen violence over understanding, control over compassion, and obsession over love. The verdict was delivered swiftly: guilty on all counts. 7 bullets, 7 shots fired in a matter of seconds, had ended a life and sealed the fate of a man whose reality was never aligned with the world around him. Yet, even as the gavel fell, questions lingered. How could a lifetime of obsession, insecurity, and fear of imperfection escalate to murder? And how many others silently bear the same dangerous truths behind closed doors?
The story of that wedding night did not end in the courtroom. Across the country, people were shocked, horrified, and fascinated by the events that had unfolded in that hotel suite. News outlets replayed the images, analyzed the interviews, and debated the question everyone asked: how could something as ordinary as makeup lead to murder? Psychologists, sociologists, and media commentators dissected the case, pointing to deeper societal issues. The groom's obsession with perfection, experts said, was not an isolated quirk. It was a symptom of a culture that values appearance above humanity, control above compassion. And the bride, trapped by fear and lifelong insecurity, became the unwitting symbol of a world that punishes imperfection. Her story inspired conversations that reached far beyond the tragedy, about the pressures of maintaining an image, about the silent struggles of those who hide behind masks, literal or figurative, about the dangers of obsessive entitlement and unchecked narcissism. The case also became a warning for families and couples everywhere. Experts emphasized that relationships built on fear, illusion, and rigid expectations are fragile at best and potentially deadly at worst. A moment of perceived deception, a tiny crack in the facade, can escalate when compounded by years of obsession and psychological instability. Even years later, the bride's family continued to speak publicly, not to sensationalize, but to ensure her story carried meaning. They wanted the world to see beyond the shocking headlines. The tragedy was preventable, the violence was avoidable, and the real crime was the culture of perfection that fueled it. For the groom, the consequences were absolute. 7 shots had taken more than a life. They had taken everything he knew: freedom, family, reputation, and ultimately, any chance of redemption. But yet the story remains a haunting reminder. Behind the veneer of beauty, behind the smiles captured in wedding photos, there's a truth that can be deadly if ignored. Obsession, control, and fear of imperfection have consequences far beyond what anyone can predict. And as we reflect on this tragic wedding night, one question lingers. In a world obsessed with appearances, how many more lives hang in the balance, waiting for a trigger no one ever expects?
The wedding night that was meant to mark the beginning of forever ended in devastation. 7 bullets fired in a matter of seconds ended a life and exposed a truth far darker than anyone could have imagined. This was not a story about makeup. It was about fear, obsession, and the consequences of a mind unprepared to handle imperfection. It was about the destructive power of societal pressures, the silent struggles hidden behind appearances, and the fragile illusions that so many build their lives around. The bride's story reminds us that the person behind the mask, behind the carefully crafted smile, behind the layers of concealment, is still human, still vulnerable, still deserving of love, understanding, and compassion. The groom's story serves as a chilling warning. When obsession, entitlement, and distorted perception collide, the results can be catastrophic. One small trigger, one moment of truth, can ignite a lifetime of unresolved fear and anger into irreversible violence. For families, for couples, for anyone living in a world obsessed with perfection, this tragedy leaves a haunting lesson. Love cannot survive on appearances alone. Acceptance is not optional, and the weight of expectation can be far deadlier than anyone imagines. As we close this chapter, we remember the bride not just as a victim, but as a symbol of courage and vulnerability, a reminder of the human cost of obsession and the fragility of life. If there is one message that resonates from this story, it is simple. Look beyond the surface, see people as they truly are, and never let fear, judgment, or obsession dictate a life. If this story left you shocked, moved, or thinking about the hidden struggles in the world around us, make sure to subscribe to Crime Vault for more true crime stories that reveal the darkest truths, the untold secrets, and the lessons we must never forget. Click that subscribe button, share this story, and join us as we uncover the human stories behind the headlines. Because every life has a story worth telling, and every warning is worth hearing before it's too late.